The sun was only beginning to lift itself over the far ridge when the first thin ribbons of gold broke through the mist that slept over the Grayson Ranch. The air smelled of dew and hay and that sweet, early light that belonged only to mornings like this, soft, quiet, almost holy. Caleb Grayson rested one boot on the bottom rail of the white fence, his gloved hands loose on the top plank, watching the slow movement of his herd beyond the pasture. The cattle were dark shapes shifting through the fog, snorting steam into the chill. It should have been a peaceful sight, and it was, mostly, but peace had a way of feeling heavy when there was no one to share it with. He'd been up since before dawn, as he always was. The routine never changed: feed the horses, check the irrigation lines, make sure the south gate stayed latched after the last storm. Work was something that never left a man alone, but Caleb didn't mind that. Work filled the silence. He adjusted his hat against the low sun, squinting toward the road that wound like a pale ribbon beyond the field. It wasn't often anyone came by this early. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles down, and the mail truck wouldn't rumble up until noon. When he heard the distant crunch of small boots on gravel, it took him a moment to place the sound. It was quick, light, and uneven, like laughter and footsteps. He turned. 2 little girls were coming down the dusty road that led past his fence. They couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, identical down to their straw-colored braids and the small freckles sprinkled across their noses. They held hands as they ran, a small cloud of dust rising behind them. One of them carried a bunch of wildflowers, daisies and purple thistle, stems bent from being clutched too tight. Their dresses were mismatched, faded from too many washes, and their boots looked a size too big. Caleb straightened, frowning slightly. The ranch was no place for little ones to wander alone. He stepped closer to the fence, calling out in that deep, easy drawl that came from years of talking to animals more than people. "Mornin', girls. You two lost." They skidded to a stop a few feet away, breathing hard, faces red from the run. The taller of the two shook her head. Her twin followed her lead, eyes bright with something he couldn't quite name. "No, sir," the taller one said, her voice small but sure. "We came to see you." Caleb blinked. "See me? You sure you got the right ranch?" The girl nodded solemnly, then glanced down at the flowers she was holding. "Mama says you're the richest man in the county. She said you got a whole barn just for horses and another just for tools." "That true?" He chuckled softly despite himself. "Something like that. Your mama tell you to come all this way?" Both girls shook their heads this time, braids swinging. "No, sir," said the second girl, who'd been quiet till now. Her voice trembled, soft as a bird's wing. "We wanted to come ourselves. We wanted to ask you something." Caleb rested his forearms on the top rail, trying to make himself smaller, less intimidating. "All right then," he said gently. "What is it you want to ask?" The girls exchanged a look. That silent kind of talk only twins seem to know. Then, together, they stepped forward until their small fingers could just barely reach the lowest plank of the fence. The first one pushed the flowers through the gap between the rails. "They're for you," she said. "We picked 'em by the creek." Caleb took the flowers carefully, his calloused hands awkward around the fragile stems. "That's mighty kind of you," he said. "Pretty little things. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, we did," the second girl whispered. Then, in a voice that quivered but didn't break, she said, "Please, mister. We just want to ask you one thing." Caleb crouched down so his eyes were level with theirs. Up close, he could see the smudges of dust on their cheeks, the uneven stitching on their hems where someone, likely their mama, had done her best to mend what couldn't be new. "Go on," he said softly. "Please," said the first girl, the one with the stronger voice. "Just be our daddy for today." The world seemed to go still. Even the cows stopped moving. Caleb blinked, certain he hadn't heard right. "I'm sorry," he said after a long moment. "What did you say?" The twins looked at him with identical faces full of hope that a grown man like him didn't know how to face. "Just for today," the bolder one said again. "You don't gotta stay forever. We just wanna know what it's like. Everybody else in town got one. We don't." Her sister's lower lip trembled. "Mama says our daddy's gone to heaven, but we never met him. So we thought maybe we could borrow one, just for today." Caleb stood there frozen, his hand tightening around the flowers. The morning light had grown stronger now, turning the mist into silver smoke that rose from the fields. He swallowed hard, searching for words that didn't sound foolish. Girls, he said carefully, that's not really how things work. The smaller twin's eyes filled with tears. She tried bravely to blink away. We ain't askin' for forever, she whispered. We just thought maybe you could play with us. Maybe you could take us ridin' or somethin'. Mama says you got horses that shine like the sun. Caleb looked past them, down the long road leading back toward town. He thought about the diner there, the one run by a tired woman named Clara Mayhew who sometimes packed his coffee to go when he came in for breakfast. She always smiled, though her eyes never quite did. He remembered seeing her once with these same two girls sitting quiet in a booth, coloring on napkins while their mama worked. He turned his gaze back to them. Two faces full of trust, of need, of something he hadn't felt in years. Your mama know you're here? He asked finally. The first girl hesitated, then nodded half-heartedly. She knows we like to walk, she said, which wasn't an answer at all. Caleb sighed. You know, your mom is probably worried sick right about now. But we'll go home soon, the second one promised. We just wanted to see if you'd say yes. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking out across the pasture again. The day was already starting to warm, the mist burning off. Somewhere in the field, a horse neighed, the sound carrying through the quiet. Caleb's chest ached in a way he didn't expect. He'd lost his wife long ago. Never had kids. He'd told himself it was better that way, less to lose, less to miss. But now, looking at these two small faces, something inside him stirred that he'd buried deep. Well, he said slowly, his voice thick, I reckon I got a little time before work starts proper. Both girls' eyes widened. You mean, you'll do it? The bold one asked. Caleb's mouth twitched into the smallest smile. Just for today, he said. But only if you promise to let your mama know where you are. They nodded so hard their braids nearly slapped their faces. The second girl clapped her hands, her earlier tears forgotten. Caleb chuckled softly. All right then, he said, swinging open the gate. Come on in. Let's see if we can find you a pony gentle enough to meet his new daddies for the day. The twins giggled, darting through the gate like two beams of sunlight, and for the first time in a long while, the ranch didn't feel quite so empty. The morning light followed them as they ran toward the stables, and Caleb walked behind, the bunch of wildflowers still in his hand, wondering how something so small could feel like it had just changed everything. The sun was easing down the sky when the first warmth of the day began to melt into gold. The shadows from the barn stretched long and soft across the yard, and the low hum of crickets was already waking up from the grass. Caleb Grayson sat on the porch steps, elbows resting on his knees, watching the two little girls chase each other around the water trough. Their laughter rang through the air, bright as silver bells, scattering the stillness that usually wrapped his evenings. They'd been there all day, from the moment he'd led them through the gate that morning. What started as awkward introductions had turned into a kind of gentle rhythm, one that surprised him with how natural it felt. He'd shown them how to brush down a horse, how to feed sugar cubes from an open palm without fear. The bolder twin, Lila, had taken to it quick, whispering secrets into the mare's ear like she was telling her a story. Her sister, June, was shyer, hanging back until Caleb lifted her up to sit on the old bay's saddle. Her squeal of delight had made him laugh out loud, a deep sound that felt like it came from a place he hadn't used in years. Now they were tired but still buzzing with that endless energy only children seemed to have. They'd eaten biscuits and gravy from his kitchen, washing it down with milk so cold it left white mustaches on their upper lips. They'd followed him as he fixed a loose latch on the chicken pen, asking more questions than he could keep up with. Why did the rooster crow in the morning? Why was the sky so big here? Why did he live all alone on such a pretty ranch? He hadn't known how to answer that last one. June came running up the steps, clutching a smooth stone she'd found near the fence. Look, Mr. Rancher. It's shaped like a heart, she said, holding it up proudly. Caleb smiled, taking the stone between his fingers. Well, I'll be. You've got a good eye, kiddo. Maybe you should keep that. Could be your lucky charm. She nodded solemnly, tucking it into the pocket of her dress before leaning against his arm. Lila plopped down on his other side, panting from running. You sure got a lot of land, she said, gazing out over the fields that rolled away into the distance. You could fit a whole town out there. Maybe, Caleb said, but towns come with noise. I like it quiet. Lila frowned thoughtfully. Don't you get lonely? The question hit harder than she knew. He looked down at her small face, at the smudge of dirt on her cheek, the strand of hair that had come loose from her braid. Sometimes, he admitted quietly. But the quiet ain't so bad when you get used to it. June looked up at him then, her eyes wide and earnest. If we lived here, you wouldn't be lonely no more. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. You got a mama who needs you back home, he said gently. Can't be stealin' other folks' little girls. We know, Lila said, though her voice had gone soft. But Mama's always so tired. We just wanted a day with someone who had time. The honesty in that nearly broke him. He looked away, pretending to watch the horses grazing in the pasture, because if he looked at them any longer, he might not have been able to speak at all. The air grew still for a while. The light was changing, orange deepening to rose, then to that smoky lavender that came before dusk. Caleb got up and went inside for a moment, returning with 2 mugs of warm cocoa. He handed them to the girls, careful not to spill. They cupped them like they were holding treasure. Thank you, Mr. Rancher, June said, smiling shyly. You can call me Caleb, he said, sitting back down beside them. They sipped in silence, watching the last bit of sun slip behind the hills. When Lila had drained her cup, she leaned her head against his arm. You were a real good daddy today, she murmured, half asleep. You didn't yell, and you didn't make us stay quiet. You let us laugh. Caleb's heart twisted in his chest. I'm glad you laughed, he said softly. That's what this place needed. For a long while, none of them spoke. The girls' breathing slowed, and the world seemed to hold its breath too. The ranch looked different now, somehow, less empty, more alive. He imagined what it might sound like if laughter like theirs lived here every day. He imagined breakfast plates for 3 instead of 1, little boots by the door, drawings tacked to the fridge. The thought was too sweet and too painful at once. When the rumble of a pickup truck came faintly from down the road, he knew the day was over. He stood and watched the dust trail rising behind the vehicle as it approached. The twins stirred, rubbing their eyes. That your mama? He asked. Lila nodded. She's comin' from work. She didn't know we were here. Please don't be mad at us. He shook his head. Not a bit, he said. But next time, you make sure to ask her first, all right? Can't have her worryin'. By the time the truck pulled up to the gate, the porch light had flickered on. A woman climbed out, a small figure in a faded uniform, her hair pulled back, face weary but kind. She froze when she saw the girls running toward her. Lila. June. Lord have mercy, I've been lookin' all over for you. She cried, dropping to her knees as they threw their arms around her. Caleb stayed where he was for a moment, watching the reunion with a strange ache blooming in his chest. Then he walked down the steps, tipping his hat. Evenin', Miss Mayhew, he said quietly. Mr. Grayson. She stood, cheeks flushed. I'm so sorry if they bothered you. I told them to stay close to town, but they weren't any trouble, he said, smiling faintly. Matter of fact, they made my day better. Clara looked from him to her daughters and back again. You sure as sunrise, he said. They just wanted to see the ranch. Fed a few horses, had some supper. I reckon they'll sleep good tonight. The woman's eyes softened. Well, thank you for not sending them away. Caleb shook his head. Couldn't have done that if I tried. The girls clung to their mother's hands, but Lila turned back once more, calling, Bye, Mr. Caleb. Bye, Daddy for today. June added, grinning wide. Caleb felt a lump rise in his throat. He raised his hand in a small wave. Good night, little ladies, he said. Clara hesitated, then gave him a look, half apology, half gratitude, and ushered them into the truck. He watched as the headlights swept across the field and the engine faded into the distance, until all that was left was the hum of crickets and the whisper of the wind through the grass. He went back to the porch and sat where they'd been, 2 empty mugs beside him. The night air was cooler now. Somewhere inside the house, the clock ticked steady, marking time that felt suddenly slower, quieter again, but different this time. He looked down at the porch rail. June's little heart-shaped stone sat there, forgotten. He picked it up, rolling it between his fingers. It was smooth, warm from the sun. He turned it over once, then tucked it carefully into his shirt pocket. The stars were just coming out, one by one, when he finally spoke into the hush. Anytime, little ones, he murmured. Anytime. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb Grayson smiled into the night, Not because he was happy, but because something inside him had begun to heal.